We are here at CCSE, and I am the chairman of CCSE, but I need to make it clear that CCSE is not the sponsor of this event. It is the Sustainability Alliance of Southern California, which I also chair. But we do want to thank and are deeply grateful to CCSE for making this facility available to us and for the other hospitalities they have extended and will continue to extend over time. Introduce Rochelle Becker. Rochelle is the founder of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility and the driving force behind almost all of the activity that led up to the joining of the Alliance by John Giesman and the efforts they're engaged in today at San Onofre. And so it's my pleasure to let you share with us what you're up to.
Okay. I'm Rochelle Becker, and I'm Executive Director of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. And we formed the Alliance in 2005 because we became absolutely disenchanted with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission ever doing their job. And when they don't do their job, it is ratepayers of California that pay the bill. And we're very tired of paying for Edison's mistakes and the NRC's approval of those mistakes and are coming out of our pocketbooks. So we approach the nuclear issue from a very different level than most people approach it. And we started in 2005. We wanted to know what the state's jurisdiction was over nuclear power plants and what they were doing to uphold that jurisdiction. And we started with the California Energy Commission. And we didn't do it because I've known John for a really long time. We did it because they're supposed to be planning for our energy future, and we wanted to know what they were doing every 2 years when they reviewed the energy plans and why they weren't looking at nuclear power when they were reviewing them. You know, were they assuming that the nuclear power plants would be here, and what were those assumptions based on? And in 2005, the Energy Commission brought every acronym agency you can think of together: FEMA, DOE, NRC. If you don't know what some of them are, I'm used to using acronyms because I've been trained by the oversight agencies to use them, but if you don't know them, let me know. Then there were all these state oversight agencies: Public Utilities Commission, Energy Commission, Coastal Commission, Water Board, Air Board, the unions, the utilities, and the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, among others. And they brought us together for 2 days, and what we got to do, which is very rare in state government, is we got to hear everybody's concerns. If you were a union, you were concerned about jobs. If you were a utility, you were concerned about resources and profits. If you were an environmentalist, you were concerned about safe operations of the plant. There were many, many perspectives, and it really helped us because this was our first summer of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, and we didn't want to go in thinking that we knew everything. We wanted to see why everybody had different concerns and how we would address those concerns over time. And so we started with the Energy Commission, and after hearing everybody's testimony, and that's everybody's testimony, they came out with really 2 recommendations. One, that we continue the moratorium on new nuclear power plants in the state of California until we finally have a solution to the radioactive waste. And 2, that the state do a cost, benefit, and risk analysis of our continued reliance on aging nuclear reactors. Well, we were really excited. This was the first since Jerry Brown was governor the last time, and he hadn't been governor again. And so we thought, good, the state's going to be doing their job. What do we do with these recommendations? And the Energy Commission said, well, all we can do is recommend. And so we took those recommendations and we walked across the street to our then Republican Assembly person, Sam Blakesley, who's also a PhD seismologist, and we said, Dr. Blakesley, will you support this bill to make sure that they do a cost, benefit, and risk analysis? And he said yes. And he put forth this bill, and you know how often bipartisan legislation passes. Not too often unless it's children and animals. But this went through with a single no vote. The legislature also wanted to know what the costs, the benefits, and the risks were of continued operation. And so in 2007, that bill went through. In 2007, the Energy Commission again recommended that we look at nuclear power and that nuclear power plants not apply for relicensing until they've done new seismic studies. And in 2008, they came up with the report. And the report, the day of the report, before they made their recommendations, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, who owns the nuclear power plant in San Luis Obispo County, announced that they'd found a new earthquake fault 1,800 feet from the door of the reactor. That's the 4th active earthquake fault within 5 kilometers. And so the Energy Commission, instead of saying, we want you to do new seismic studies. They said, if they're cost effective, they took out if they're cost effective and said, you have to do new seismic studies, and you should do them before you apply for license renewal. Well, PG&E ignored that and filed for license renewal for Diablo Canyon. And the Alliance flew back and met with the then chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who's just recently resigned, and said, you know, the last time you took in a license application for a nuclear power plant, you didn't do your job. You didn't require that the utilities looked offshore for earthquake faults. We're in California. We're on the other side of the Pacific Rim. We think you ought to be looking offshore to make sure that these plants are built safely. And the NRC listened to the utility at first and said, oh no, we don't need to do that. And we said, here's a Shell oil geologist report that says there's an active earthquake fault 2.5 miles from the door of the plant. Do you think you need to look at it now? And the NRC at first said no. And we had to sue the NRC to get them to look at earthquake faults offshore. But we prevailed, and they had to reconstruct the units. When they first reconstructed them, they did them backwards, and so they had to do it again. Unit 2 was designed to Unit 1 was designed to Unit 2 specifications, Unit 2 was designed to Unit 1 specifications. So the cost went from the original price tag, actually for Diablo Canyon, of under $300 million to $5.7 billion when we finally paid for the plant. And for San Onofre, it was under $180 million, and it was $4.7 billion when you finished San Onofre. So we're quite concerned about what seismic means to these nuclear power plants. Technology's improved, the ability to interpretate data has improved, and we need these new seismic studies. So we said to the NRC commissioner, you know, when you didn't do your job, it cost us about $4.4 billion last time. Let's see if you can do your job this time. You know, I realize that you probably were barely born when we licensed Diablo Canyon. My daughter's probably older than you are and spent her life protesting this plant. But at your perspective, you're leaving this waste to your children and your grandchildren. And we're talking about 2 nuclear power plants that are outliers. We sit on the Pacific Rim. You need to look at these seismic issues. And also what you need to do is have your seismic experts work with California seismic experts before you okay any license renewal activity whatsoever. So then when you do it, we have some faith that you actually did your job and we can invest in that. Well, it took the chairman several months to deny our request, which we were not particularly surprised at. And then PG&E also had filed to fund the license renewal proceeding. They wanted ratepayers to pay for the license renewal process before the seismic studies had been done. And we filed in this case and we said, how are you going to pass on any money? $85 million or $10 million or $8.5 billion, it doesn't make any difference. We don't know what we're investing in. And before we invest a penny, you need to finish these seismic studies. Well, that case dragged on for over a year, even though the Energy Commission had recommended that they give them back their license and wait till the seismic proceedings were done. The PUC didn't do that. They let this hearing go on for 1.5 years and finally dismissed it and gave it back to the utilities in January of this year and said, you know, come back when the seismic studies are done. Well, Edison and SDG&E filed for their seismic studies. And, well, I had to take a step back. PG&E then filed for $17 million, also filed at the same time for the license renewal for $17 million for new seismic studies. And we went to our seismic experts, including our assembly person, Senator Blakesley, and said, does this look like about the right scope and the right amount of money for what they're asking to do? And they all said, yes, that looks about right. And so we didn't even participate in the case. We just watched what they filed. We wanted them to expedite it because we wanted these seismic studies done. We do not oppose money to do seismic studies. We oppose money to build anything or continue operation until they're finished. And then Southern California Edison and SDG&E filed in 2011, a couple months before Fukushima. And they first filed for $21 million. And we thought, that's probably fair. It's $4 million more than Diablo, but Diablo has been more seismically studied than San Onofre, so that difference doesn't seem like that much money. But what they had done was they filed in their general rate case. And I don't know if you know anything about general rate cases, but they are behemoth cases in which there's no room to sit when you go to these hearings. And there's 5,600 pages of testimony from the utility. So we said, you know, could you take the seismic issue and the license renewal funding issue out of this general rate case and put them in their own cases, just like you did for Diablo Canyon. Let's treat these both plants the same. And so the judge agreed, and the assigned commissioner agreed. They took those two issues out, and I asked Edison's attorney, when they might be filing for license renewal, because some of the funding was for license renewal, and they sent back a message that said probably in the spring of 2013. And so when they refiled, when Edison and SDG&E refiled for the seismic funding, it was $64 million, not $21 million. Well, we were okay with 21 million. We were not okay with 64 million. So we said we need hearings, which they did not want to have. We need testimony filed, and those hearings and testimony were done last year. Now, what's really important to understand is that there was an independent peer review panel set up for Diablo Canyon. It's made up of the seismic expert of the Energy Commission, Coastal Commission, California Geologic Survey, California Seismic Commission, the EMA, Emergency Management Association, and the utilities. And what was good about this is everybody had seismic expertise, except for the Public Utilities Commission, the ultimate decision maker. And so when we were in hearings, we asked Edison, well, where's your independent peer review panel? And they said, we've hired our own. I said, well, you hired your own independent peer review panel? Yes. And you're paying for your own peer review panel? Yes. And they report to you? Yes. Can you define independent for us, please? This is not independent. Why are we treating San Onofre differently than Diablo Canyon? Now, when we asked the PUC some of the same questions, the PUC really isn't sure that they need an extra oversight eyes. Even though after the $4 billion in cost overruns during licensing, they said, well, you know what? In retrospect, we probably should have done an independent analysis. Here they are, 20-something years later, not doing an independent analysis. And so we said, well, did you talk to the Coastal Commission's seismologist when you did this? No. Energy Commission? No. Geologic Survey? No. Any of the independent peer review panel for Diablo Canyon? No. Who did you rely on when you came up with these numbers for Edison, which was $64 million minus 10%? And they said, we relied on the utility. And I said, how'd that work for you last time? We paid $4 billion in extra money last time. Let's not do that this time. And we left the proceedings thinking that the judge was going to assign the same independent peer review panel for Diablo Canyon as they did for San Onofre. Except for when we started to attend the independent peer review panel meetings for Diablo this January, we found out that they weren't operating under the Open Meeting Act, the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. And we said, wait a minute, these are state agencies. You have to operate under the Brown Act, the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. And the Public Utilities Commission didn't want to do that. The other oversight agencies already are under the Open Meeting Act, and John brought this to their attention, and we'll give you a little bit more details. So what they decided was they have a different oversight panel to oversee the seismic issues at San Onofre. And you'd still have the other oversight agencies looking at it, but the ultimate decision-making would be the Energy Division of the Public Utilities Commission. That Energy Division received funding for a seismic expert last summer. They have not hired one. So the ultimate decision maker is somebody that doesn't have a seismic expert that can either, and their staff had said, we're going to just listen to the utility. So we challenged it, we lost, and so you have a different oversight panel for San Onofre as there is for Diablo Canyon. Now, a couple months ago, we found out that they're going to hire Scripps to do their offshore work, which is a good idea. Scripps is a very competent, organization, and they will do a good job. But we were concerned about the scope, who was deciding the scope of this seismic study, and we were also just concerned about how much we're going to pay. So we contacted one of the seismologists at Scripps and asked to meet with them when we were down here this week, and they said no. Now, we've been able to meet with every single member of the Seismic Oversight Committee for Diablo Canyon, but we aren't able to meet with the people that they've assigned to do the seismic work for San Onofre. We are the only voice, the only public ratepayer voice before the Energy Commission, the Coastal Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the State Water Board. We sit on the oversight committee for once-through cooling. There's 1 million gallons a minute that go through this plant. Is the biggest detriment to our sea life is San Onofre. Impingement and entrainment and the thermal issues at San Onofre are much bigger than any other facility. So we sit on the oversight panel to discuss, are we going to allow continuation of once-through cooling, or are we going to provide alternatives which are required under the EPA's Decision 316B? Well, it's going to be interesting because not many, or maybe not any, of the alternatives will necessarily work at the nuclear power plants. They're coastal plants, and there's some big problems with alternatives. Plus, there's a great big investment in alternatives to cooling. And what our position is phase these nuclear plants out by the end of their license. Of course, Edison's managed to phase theirs out at the moment. But phase them out by the end of their license and don't put another facility on our coast. Don't make another eyesore as we drive through Oceanside to San Clemente. Just phase this nuclear power plant out. Then you don't need the once-through cooling. Then you don't need to worry about more waste produced for another 20 years, which the NRC last year had a hearing in California and said it's our proposal to leave waste on site for 250 years. What did California's coast look like 100 years ago, 50 years ago? Climate change, erosion, earthquakes, and you're going to leave radioactive waste on our coast for 250 years? We don't think so. Well, the DC Court of Appeals ruled a couple weeks ago that the NRC erred when they said you can safely leave it on site for 60 years. And so it's back to the drawing board. Every bit of waste that's been produced at San Onofre and every other nuclear power plant is still sitting where it was produced. This is a seismically active coast. Now, Edison and PG&E continue to tell us it's seismically safe. How do they know that? They've asked us for $64 million to do new seismic studies. How do they know it's seismically safe? We don't know. We don't know. And are we willing to accept the risks? Whether you're pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear, conservative or liberal, rich or poor, radiation doesn't make any difference to any of you. If it happens, it happens. There's no homeowner's insurance. There's no business insurance. Federal liability limits are $12 billion. The liability costs in Japan are nearing $125 billion. And that was a small fishing village. This is the coast of California, a very wealthy area and a very litigious area. So the minute a first ounce of radiation leaves the property line, you're going to have a whole line of attorneys suing everybody forever. Let's not do that. Let's not waste our money. Let's invite them to look at solutions. We can either invest in an aging plant that isn't operating and we're not sure will ever operate safely again, or efficiently again, or reliably again, or we can invest in new energy paradigm, new jobs, new rates, new infrastructure, new resources, and California can lead the world in a new energy paradigm versus funding aging reactors. It's our choice. You know, we invite SDG&E, we invite Edison, we invite PG&E to work with us. We're not opposing their profits. We're not opposing what they do for energy. We're saying no more nuclear power plants on our coast. Enough is enough. And it's time to all of us to sit down at that table like we did at the Energy Commission in 2005 and talk about what it's going to cost and how we're going to replace them and what is the best investment for ratepayers. Because our pockets are emptying and it's time to invest in a new future. Thank you. And